Welcome everyone. If you're new here, I'm Kim and you are at Stones Hill Homestead. Today we are making bologna. That is what our family calls it. It is a recipe from my husband's side of the family, and we're going to get started with 14 pounds of ground beef, and it needs to be thawed. And now that it's thawing, I am starting this by putting this hamburger in the bowl. And we are going to layer the seasonings throughout the layers of this ground beef. It's not fully thawed yet, so I am going to layer it, and then it'll stick in the fridge until everything has melted together and we are ready for the process of canning. So I have my mix and chop from Pampered Chef, and now I am adding 1/2 pound of Tender Quick. This recipe, the original recipe, works with 50 pounds of hamburger. I have quartered this recipe. I only need a little bit, and I only want to have enough for a full canner. So I have cut everything down for this recipe. Like I said, we're starting with 14 pounds of ground beef, 1/2 pound of Tender Quick, and here I am adding a portion of the pepper. 1 teaspoon of pepper is what I've just added, and I am layering those ingredients just so that all those spices are layered throughout all this meat, and when we mix it together, it's easier to get everything mixed in to all the hamburger. And the next thing we're going to add is some celery salt, 1/4 teaspoon I add here, garlic salt, I add that as well, and onion powder. You can add blended onions. They have to be very diced, very small. You could also rehydrate minced onions. Very easy to do that. You just want to rehydrate them before you add them to the beef so that they're easier to cook down in the process. Once that's all added in, here you see me adding that onion powder, and I'm just breaking it up here just to get any clumps out of it. I do end up adding about 2 teaspoons of onion powder, 1 teaspoon of garlic salt, 1 teaspoon of celery salt, and then, of course, if you choose, go ahead and add those onions. The total recipe, I ended up with 2.5 teaspoons of pepper and then 2 cups of water. After all spices are added in, the hamburger you see here is still frozen. So I'm just going to cover that with foil, and I'm going to let all of that thaw. It's just about thawed, but before I put it in the fridge overnight to meld together, I want that hamburger completely thawed and everything mixed up. So that's what I'm going to do right here, is just wait for the thawing process to happen. And now everything is mixed together and thawed, and we're going to refrigerate overnight, about 12 hours in the fridge. You can go 24 hours. It's perfectly fine. Just keep it cold until it's time to pack. And now here we are. We are getting ready to pack the 1.5 pint jars here. I purchased these jars specifically for this. These are ball canning jars and ball lids that came with them. I got them at a great price, and I didn't want to have any kinds of jars with the shoulders. It needs to be a straight jar for this recipe. So the meat has sat for a good 24 hours in the refrigerator, and I'm going to start making little pieces of hamburger, and I am going to pack that down in the jars. We need to pack this as tight as we can, and as it processes, that meat will shrink, it will produce those juices, it'll release those juices, and we will have a meatloaf log style of product. You see me over here to the right. I am measuring every bit of meat that goes into the jars. It is 1.5 pounds of meat. I am shy by about 2 ounces. It's actually 1 pound, 6 ounces of beef that I am putting in each jar. I make sure the exact same is in every jar. And the reason is I need 1-inch headspace, and I don't want to overfill these jars, and I have exactly 14 pounds of meat. So I want to make sure that I have enough meat for the 9 jars for canning process. Many people will tell you that, oh, you can't do this. You can't do it the way she's doing it. I want you to do your own research, and I want you to do your own canning process. You can water bath this for 3 hours, or you can pressure can it for 90 minutes. Either one works spectacular. My husband's family was conservative, and they didn't have access to the pressure canners way back when, so they did pressure can. And obviously, that did not hurt anybody. And I believe I said pressure can. I meant water bath. They did water bath. And obviously, we're all living, but you need to do what's comfortable for you and your family. So I want you to be aware this recipe can be preserved either way. Now I'm done putting meat in the first jar, and as you can see, that is still way too much. This is where I decide that 1.5 pounds of meat is too much. So I am taking 2 ounces of meat out of that, and I am going to pack the other jar. I am pretty precise about this. You don't have to be. This is just what works for me. So I end up with 1 pound, 6 ounces in each of these 1.5 pint jars. That would be a 24-ounce jar. And here are all the jars that are filled with the ground beef. The bologna is what we call it. To the left here, you see a pan that I have made little beef logs, and I will show you that at the end of the video. This is a great summer sausage. This will be shown at the end on how I did that. Here you see me wiping off each rim with some vinegar. I want to make sure there's no grease or any kind of food particles around that rim. We're going to get each of these jars cleaned off before we put that lid on. Because it is a greasy product, you want to make sure that you get it cleaned so that your seal does not fail. I will continue to clean these rims off, and then I will come back and lid them, and we will get them in the canner. And here we are placing those lids on each of the jars. Once I get all the lids on, I will take my bands and I will put them on finger tight. Do not over tighten your bands, as it will cause your lid to buckle. I also have washed and warmed up these lids before I'm placing them on each of the jars. Then we will get them inside that canner, and we will show you the processing of them in a pressure canner. And the last band is going on that jar, and we are starting to place these into the pressure canner. I have 9 1.5 pint jars. My pressure canner only fits 8. So here I'm checking the bands just to make sure that I've just got them finger tight. Here I've placed 8 of those 1.5 pint jars in my canner. I'm making sure nothing is touching each other. I'm giving them ample space to move around. We don't want them banging around each other. And I want to make sure that when I put that lid on, there's plenty of room. With this pressure canner, all-American pressure canner, you need to add enough water in the bottom for the process. Mine says about 4 quarts, 3 to 4 quarts. I always make sure I add at least 3, sometimes 4, depending on how long the process is going to be. Just follow your canner's instructions. I also add a little bit of vinegar into the water here, and I believe you can use cream of tartar in the water too to keep that white film from happening. I have just always used vinegar. I got some water on top of that lid. I'm just going to make sure I pour that off. I'm putting olive oil around that bevel of the All-American canner. This canner does not have that rubber seal that you see in Prestos or Miros or other canners. This one requires you to add that oil around that bevel. It creates your seal, so when you place the lid for the canner on top of it, it seals and you have no breakdown of that rubber seal. And so now the lid is on. I am starting to crank on the wing nuts, and I will do that across from each other until all 6 are tightened, making sure that this lid remains level. I did use my Tupperware citrus peeler to make sure it's level, as I always do. And we're going to finish cranking this down, and we will bring this up to a very slow, low heat until I start seeing steam come out of the vent pipe. Everything that's in the canner is cold. I do not want to heat this up too fast and cause thermoshock. I want to heat that ground beef inside those jars very slowly. So this is going to take a process. I've got all day, and it is easy for me to do. So I'm going to bring this up till I have steam coming out of that vent pipe, steady steam for 10 minutes. Once that steam is at 10 minutes of venting, then I will add that weight. And I'm showing you the weight here. It'll be 10 pounds of pressure, or 10-pound weight for 11 pounds of pressure. And I will pressure can this for 90 minutes. Now remember, I said I still have 1 jar that did not fit in this canner, and that can will be water bathed. On the left-hand side, you see I have that 1 can left that needs to be processed. I am going to water bath that one for 3 hours since I'm going to be in the kitchen. And the vent pipe now has been venting for 10 minutes. And we are going to add that weight at 10 pounds. And we are going to bring that pressure gauge up to 10 to 11 pounds of pressure. And we will pressure can for 90 minutes. And here you see it is up to full pressure, and we are going to start timing. I just wanted to show you this little piece. In the back left, you see my other can is boiling nicely, and I will need to remain in the kitchen to add water to that. Now I am done canning, and I am pulling everything out of the canners now. The water bath jar is the first jar you see, and I'm just going to start placing these all on the towel. The texture of water bath meat is a lot different than pressure canned. More people can tolerate the pressure or the texture of water bath ground beef compared to pressure canned. I don't know why that's the difference. It is though, and there is a difference. The color on water bath meat is much more appealing. Here I am pulling out that pressure canned meat. It is still pretty hot. It came down to temperature, and again, I am just letting this cool down, and I won't touch these jars until they have all cooled, and then I will take off the bands and clean those jars. And here you see everything has been pulled out of the canners, and they are just gonna sit tight here until tomorrow, 24 hours. I'm gonna leave them sit. Everything looks fabulous. Everything has sealed. I ended up cooking those beef logs, which you will see shortly, and we slice them up like summer sausage. They are really fantastic. If you want more information on those, I'll be happy to add that to the description below. So thanks again, everyone, for joining, and I hope and pray that you have a great holiday season. Be blessed, and as always, laugh as much as you breathe.